Welcome to Wilder. Today, I'm honored to be joined here by Andrew MacDonald, who lives a seemingly nomadic lifestyle, traveling all over the world and taking people out on wildlife photography tours and to shoot for clientele in wild environments. Andrew, a little bit over a year ago, you got to travel to Antarctica and were filming wildlife out there. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the most fascinating things you got to encounter or see in Antarctica?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those places, I don't know even where you start with Antarctica, because whichever direction you face, it's like something you've never seen before. So everything is pretty incredible and fascinating. I had no idea really what to expect when I was going there. But I think probably the most surprising thing for me was, you've seen pictures of emperor penguins a lot. You've seen those kind of things, but I wasn't expecting quite so much the mountain ranges. And then there's also these areas with ice tunnels, which is just the most crazy landscape you can imagine. And then the ice waves. Those are probably the two things that surprised me the most about the whole continent. Just these folds of ice, which looks like frozen waves in the sea, but you're walking through the tunnels, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. And one of the main things about Antarctica is it really does, there's nowhere else on Earth I don't think that you can be where you actually feel like you're on a different planet. It doesn't even feel like you're on Earth anymore when you're there. And I know a lot of people go to Antarctica and experience it from the ocean. They'll do the cruise ships. But the place where I work is very much in the interior of Antarctica. The only time you're near the coast is when you fly to the emperor penguin colony. So you're way in the middle of Antarctica, and it just feels like you're probably, I'd say, on the moon or something. And even one of the camps there is designed to look like a space base. So yeah, it's everywhere you look is just fascinating. And another big thing there is the silence. You can, if you're out there at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, the sun doesn't set, so you can stand out there and you can literally hear the only noise you hear is like the ice cracking. It's like you can hear it moving and cracking. So it's a pretty surreal place to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and one of your, I know you showed in a few videos, but in one of them you really highlight that kind of like moon base looking area that you were at in Antarctica. And yeah, that really does feel like it's off of a different planet, like a moon around Jupiter or something like that. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
They've even had they've had astronauts stay there, and they say it's the closest thing they've felt to being in space was sort of being there. Like the feeling of going home was like you'd been on another planet or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think for a lot of people, getting to do wildlife photography in Antarctica with emperor penguins, for example, like you said, seems like kind of almost like an unattainable dream. Besides the ice being everywhere, what do you feel like contributes most to that experience of making it feel like such a unique place? I know you mentioned like the silence, for example, as being one thing. Is there many other things that you can mention?
I think, probably one of the most special things is that that there's so few people visit there every year. So you're standing in places, and sometimes when we would go for like a hike, you're roped up and you're walking on glaciers and up to the mountains. You're in most places you're the first people to have ever walked there, which is it's pretty crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, just the fact that so few people get to visit the continent is one of the things that makes it probably more different to anywhere else. Because the temperature is not as cold as people might think. It's probably colder. It's way colder in Canada, for example.
Yeah.
Apart from now when it's winter, and it's winter in Antarctica now, so it's definitely
colder
pretty chilly there right now. Yeah, and it's dark 24/7. So
yeah. It might not be quite as fun of a place to visit in the wintertime.
No, I think I'll leave the winter time to the scientists in their science bases.
Yeah. So what's the experience like photographing penguins and kind of getting to be so close to them out in the wild, their colonies? I think it's so cool how, like, obviously you still want to keep a respectful distance so it doesn't become a problem ever. But like they just, because of, the lack of human interaction in the past and like the lack of hunting and all that stuff, they have none of that fear with you. So it seems like, at least in the videos, you're able to just have these really intimate, cool encounters. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of your experiences with them?
Yeah, obviously when I was first going out to Antarctica a couple of years ago, that was, for me, the main thing I was looking forward to was seeing and photographing the emperor penguins, with wildlife being one of my favorite things. So like, it's very, very strictly monitored by the organizations there. So you're supposed to be 30 meters away from a big colony and 5 meters away from individual penguins. So and like you said, they're not used to humans, so they don't actually fear humans, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
The only people they would have seen throughout history is early explorers, and I think some of those explorers were actually having to eat penguins to survive back then.
Wow.
But they don't really have anything ingrained in their system to be scared of humans. So, you can walk there with your group and the chicks. A lot of the time you're actually having to walk further and further back as the chicks just walk towards you to see what's going on, which can be quite annoying when you're trying
chasing
to
you
set up
down.
a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're trying to set up some nice videos or some nice stills, and let's say you've got your prime lens on, and you've got the right distance, and then you manage to settle down, and then you look and they're like 6 or 7 of them just walking towards you. So it's pretty crazy that way. But just you can definitely get close, but you have to keep your distance. And there's been a lot of security around the aviation flu and stuff for the last few years, so we have to be very careful not to take any diseases between colonies or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. So you've been to Antarctica and some of the coldest places in the world, but you've also been all over Africa, for example, I know, running safaris and being a tour guide and shooting for safari companies over there. What's maybe the best part about wildlife photography in somewhere like Africa that maybe is unique to Africa that you feel like you can't really get anywhere else on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the main thing is just almost every animal you're looking to photograph in Africa is super exciting.
Yeah.
You've got the most crazy mammals on the planet running around here. So that's probably one of the things that makes it most unique to anywhere else. I mean, obviously you can get elephants in Asia and stuff, but when you see an African elephant, these kind of experiences you're not going to get anywhere else in the world. And lions and cheetahs and wild dogs, all these animals. That's what makes it unique to me, is just being able to plonk yourself in the middle of their environment in your safari vehicle. And what makes it special is that they don't really pay attention to you. Like, it's rare for, unless you're doing something maybe unethical, then they're going to sort of retaliate a little bit. But as long as you're kind of respecting their boundaries, and you can just pretty much watch them going around their daily activity as normal. And you're just plonked in the middle of this wilderness with these animals just doing what they would do if you weren't even there.
So is it kind of like the penguins in that there's like a lack of human fear historically? I would imagine there is some historically. So what kind of causes that naturalness that you're talking about?
It's basically, as soon as you're in a safari vehicle, they don't seem to register individual humans, but as soon as you're on foot walking, they run. So it's ingrained in them to fear humans on foot because it's probably hunting or poaching. So that's, as soon as you're in a safari vehicle, they see sort of one large unit as opposed to individual human beings. So you can be right next to like antelopes or lions or whatever, and they just don't really single you out. But people are always, quite often when they see videos of me next to lions on safari vehicles, they're like, are you not scared that the lions are going to attack? But there's also, it's like when you're there you feel very safe because there's not an association with humans being food either. And quite often I'm actually more like, if I was to step off a vehicle, I'm actually scared of chasing the lions away as opposed to them attacking me. That's probably more of where my brain is at. I don't want to disturb them because they might run away, as opposed to them seeing me and attacking me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Do you know what the injury or death rates is on people who do safaris?
I don't actually know. It's very rare for,
Very rare.
If anything, it's not going to be lion attacks. I can't even really, if these things happen, it's normally in areas where maybe in a more of a, somebody has private land and they've bought lions and those lions have been fed by hand, and then there might be, they're so used to vehicles being the source of food. So that's when, those sort of smaller game ranges, which you don't really get so much in the areas where I work anyway.
Yeah.
I definitely don't work in everywhere I work is a national park, so there's, zero interference with the wildlife.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was reading the other day in Yosemite, which is close to where I live, that more deers injure people than the black bears that we have in Yosemite do. And that's just because, really? In general, it's probably, I'm sure it's the same as the lions, where they don't want to be around you. They view you as someone who's going to hunt them, whatever, right? Or scare them away. But then the deers are not bothered by you because it's not the same type of relationship. But then because of that, people are dumb and just walk right up to the deers and then the deers kick them.
There's no fear.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think it's sometimes a good thing that we fear certain animals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious. So what is the most dangerous part of an African's savanna then? If it's not the lions, what would it be?
I mean, the biggest death rate actually is from mosquitoes with malaria. That's the biggest actual killer in Africa is a mosquito, which is one of the smallest things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, say, if you're going on a bushwalk, which is something, it's a regular thing to do with guests, it's not so much a photographic activity because you can't really get close to animals when you're on foot. That's more for the safari vehicle or like a wildlife hide. But if you're doing like a bushwalk with guests, then the biggest thing your guide is scared of is definitely buffalo, elephant. If it's a morning walk, you're looking out for hippo who might be returning to the river because they've been feeding during the night, so they're walking back to the river. So yeah, it's actually the plant eaters who are the most dangerous ones.
Yeah. Yeah,
apart from crocodiles. Crocodiles take quite a few people, but mainly because people's lives are on the river. They're fishing or they're doing whatever they need to do in the river. And that's where the biggest deaths come from with the crocs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Things like lions and leopards and hyenas and stuff is super, super rare. In fact, I don't really know of many cases at all.
So what is the most incredible encounter you've ever had during, the many safaris that you've had? Is there one that stands out in your mind that's really maybe the highlight of your whole safari career?
Yeah, I think it'd be difficult to choose one, And now I'm probably going to get off this call and I'm going to remember 4 or 5 things that I forget to mention now. But I've had some amazing experiences in Zambia. We had a pack of wild dogs. We were watching them for quite a few hours, and then a herd of elephants come walking by, and the elephants obviously don't like the wild dogs, so those guys start chasing each other backwards and forwards. Elephants are trumpeting and going mad, but the wild dogs were pretty much just having fun, running around the elephants. But the elephants just felt threatened because of a predator, and they had younger elephants in the herd there. Even things which doesn't have to be like crazy active stuff. It can be just being out on a game drive and stopping and looking at the stars in a place where there's like zero light pollution. There's a place where I've worked before, it's like 360 degrees, no trees. And it's just the most sky you can possibly imagine seeing, and not a single piece of light pollution for, tens and tens and tens of kilometers. So that's a special thing. Those are the kind of things that I would probably remember more than as opposed to, lions chasing antelopes and all this stuff. I have had the probably most exhilarating thing was last year. I had a male lion. I was sitting in the vehicle, and I quite often sit in a vehicle with no front door so I can get the camera as low as possible. And this young male lion, maybe a couple of years old, so he's pretty big by then, he sort of saw the camera and decided to come across and see what was going on, and he was so close his breath was on my knee.
Wow.
And he was sniffing, his nose was on the camera, touching the camera, and I was just sitting as still as I possibly could. And then he got to say to me, he almost kind of lifted his paw to kind of, to see what was going on, and I just flicked the camera lens a tiny bit, like moved it 2-3 inches, and he ran off.
Wow.
And I've got that all at the same time. I was also filming that on my phone, but it's the kind of thing I would never. If you put that kind of thing on social media, people don't know the context behind the situation, and you would just get smashed. It'd probably be viral, but it would. I would just
get wrecked. Yeah.
And there's lots of photographers would share that stuff to get the publicity and look how cool I am for doing this. But I just keep it on my phone and show it to friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I don't think I've seen that. Post that up ever, but you're right. Yeah, like it is so hard in situations like that. Like I was literally watching a video the other day where there was a situation where someone was photographing an owl, and some other hiker walked up and flushed the owl, but all you see is the owl like turn and then flush, and so a bunch of people were commenting like this is unethical and stuff. And he was and then he showed the footage later of like it was some other person, like, right? So yeah, it's tricky in this situation.
People are quick to jump on comments. The situation that is caught on film can, it's determined by 10 minutes before whatever happened. There's no context behind the situation. And actually what we did in the situation was extremely professional. We sat very still. We didn't panic. We just stayed super still. Yeah. So it was actually handled very professionally, but you put that on social media and I think you're you're just asking for some hate. And I've got videos of me sitting on the ground next to hyenas, photographing hyenas, who are very, very chilled animals. But yeah, I wouldn't pop it up on social media.
Yeah, yeah. So in a moment like that, because I know you're saying that lions, generally you feel confident around them. In a moment like that, did you have any sort of fear going on there? Or?
The heart was racing for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say it was fear. It was kind of like excitement, anticipation as to what this guy's going to do. But I didn't feel like anything bad was going to happen in the situation. But yeah, you have to obviously respect these animals. When I say I'm not scared of him when we're on safari and stuff, it doesn't mean that things can happen and you have to respect them for sure.
Totally.
But this was also a young, curious male lion, which is, you just have to watch out with those guys.
I guess my next question is for you is, when are you going to be taking me on an Antarctica trip and a African safari trip?
That's a good one. I would love to join you. I reckon let's start with Africa. It's definitely more achievable for now. Yeah. Antarctica is a super hard place to get to, and a very, very expensive place to get to. But I'm very keen for you to come out. I think you'd absolutely love, if you'd go on a safari, I think you would just be blown away. Because I see how enthusiastic you are in your videos when you're doing most of the birding stuff. But even if you were just coming here to do the birding, the different species and varieties, especially during like a breeding season when the migratory birds are here, I think it would blow your mind. And man, never mind seeing an elephant and a giraffe and all these animals would just, it's crazy.
Yeah, I would have a field day, that's for sure. One day it'll happen. In one of your videos, you talked about your journey to get into the career of wildlife photography and how you kind of traveled the world for almost a year, I believe you said, and then returned home and decided, that was kind of when you decided, like, I'm going to go for this. Like, I want to do this. You invested what you could into your photography to get started. And I know that I think within the span of like 4 years, you said that you were able to make the transition into doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that journey and what it was that was revealed to you maybe during your trip that had you so intrigued and kind of had you fall in love with photography as a career?
I had already really enjoyed photography beforehand, but it was something, I maybe had a tiny little point and shoot camera on family holidays and I would snap some cool little shots. And then during the trip, it wasn't so much what happened on the trip, it was more after the trip. People were quite interested in the pictures I'd taken. Yeah. So, I'd posted some stuff maybe on probably back then it would be Facebook. I was posting stuff on in 2012, I think 2013 it was. And then a few people were like, oh, these are really, really good. And then a local art exhibition was doing they do a weekend once a year where we have local people exhibiting, and they asked me to exhibit in that sort of stuff. So that's where I was first like, people were actually quite interested in this stuff. So I said to my parents that I was going to invest in some camera gear and become a photographer, but I'm not even sure that I thought it would be possible at that moment in time. Yeah. And then, slowly it started to take up more and more of my time. So I made the jump to come out here and concentrate more on the wildlife and the safari side of things.
What about photography keeps you intrigued as opposed to other, hobbies that you could have had, or other passions, I guess, you could have had?
One of the things with photography is that almost everywhere I go is something I probably couldn't afford to go to. So, the camera takes me to these places, which keeps me super intrigued. And then, I suppose with all types of photography, every time you go out, it's different. So it's very rare that you go out and do exactly the same thing as you did the day before, even if you're in the exact same location. Yeah. In wildlife, you never know what you're going to see every single day. So you're always on your toes, and I never really feel like I can go on a month-long shoot, and for 30 days I'm on game drives twice a day, and I never really get bored of it. Yeah. I'm always chasing that next shot or that next cool thing that happens, Yeah. So it keeps me on my toes. So I find it very hard to even get bored with it.
So if you had to pick any place in the world that you haven't already been, where would it be?
Good question. I would say, can I have like 2 or 3 options?
Go for it. Yeah. No limits.
I think if I'm doing something like landscape, it's always been a big goal of mine to go to Iceland for the Northern Lights. And I know I should have done that when I was living in Scotland, and it's super easy to get there. It's like a 2-hour flight, but I've wanted to do that even more since I've been living out here in South Africa in Cape Town. So
Yeah.
that's a big one for me. And obviously I've done way down south in Antarctica, so I would love to go up to Svalbard to photograph some polar bears. People always think that polar bears are in the south as well, but no, penguins and polar bears are opposite sides of the world.
Yeah.
So I would love to go and see the polar bears. I've always wanted to do the gorillas and the chimps in Uganda, which is where I'm hopefully going to go in August. So
Yeah.
if it was outside of Africa for wildlife, I'd probably say the Amazon, to maybe do some of those boat trips to see the jaguars. And
Yeah.
those are quite high on my list for wildlife outside of Africa, would be the jaguars.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever been able to do jungle photography before? I'm trying to think if I've seen you do any.
Maybe only in Madagascar I've done stuff with the lemurs.
Yeah, that's right.
It's jungle photography is challenging. Eh?
Yeah.
It's especially if you're doing like maybe bird life or with the lemurs. Most of the time you're scrambling through a forest which is slippery, muddy, and you're trying to shoot animals which are above you in the trees, and they've got like a bright sky behind, and they're darker shade of animals. So
Yep.
that's probably some of the most challenging photography I've done is in the jungle with the lemurs.
I got into wildlife photography first in Costa Rica and a lot of the jungles around there. And so
that's
monkeys,
one of the places I would also love to go.
Yeah, Costa Rica, it's a great spot. Monkeys are a big thing there, so I'd see a lot of monkeys around, and I would try to photograph them. But got some decent ones of the ones that are a little bit too friendly with humans. Got some decent shots of those. Yeah. But the ones that are like really wild, I don't think I ever got a good shot of like a really healthy wild howler monkey, for example, or whatever.
It's always the ones that are more used to human that are easier to photograph, but you want to get those super wild ones.
Yeah. One of my first experiences, I guess, talking about like fear in animals and all that stuff, when I was first getting into wildlife photography in Costa Rica, about like maybe a month or two in, I was solo walking out into the jungle, and I was just at a certain area, and I like pulled off on the side of the road and just decided to kind of walk out there. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 2 months into wildlife photography, so I'm just like, I wonder what I can find here. It looked like a good spot to pull out and walk into the jungle. So I'm walking into the jungle down like this like little dirt trail through the jungle, and maybe about like I don't know, maybe about like a half mile into the jungle, down the trail, I'm seeing a sign that says like, be careful, jaguars in this area and all that stuff. And as opposed to lions, my understanding, at least, of jaguars in Costa Rica is that, it's not like they like to be seen by humans, so it's not like they're going to, be hyper aggressive. But if they have an opportunity, they might take it, if you're a solo traveler. I'm like starting to think about this, and I'm like, oh goodness, like, am I just dead meat standing out here? Like, was this smart to do? So I got really nervous and headed back to the car. But yeah, definitely some really good memories I have during my time in Costa Rica, and I'd love to make it back myself someday. So
yeah. It's as soon as you're on foot in a wild area, you have a whole new sort of respect for where you are. You can drive past stuff on a bush on a game drive, and as soon as you're on a bushwalk, your senses are like so much more alert to everything, and you feel pretty vulnerable all of a sudden. So it's a good way to feel, just to bring you back down to respecting where you are.
It's good to remember that without all of our tools and buildings, men are still vulnerable and susceptible.
We're quite far down that food chain once you're walking around in the wilderness.
Yep. So I know you're hosting 2 tours throughout the rest of this year, one in Uganda and one in Kenya. What are you looking forward to most about hosting those?
I'd say probably that both these locations I've not been to before, and they're both things which I could easily have mentioned in places that I've, if there was 2 places I could shoot in the world, Uganda and Kenya are probably 2 of them. So the gorillas and the chimpanzees in Uganda, I think, will be an extremely special, life-changing sort of thing to experience, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And then up in Kenya, we have the big tusker elephants, which is, I can't remember the exact weight of the tusks, but once an elephant gets a certain size of tusk, it becomes known as a big tusker. And you find them up in a national park called Amboseli. And sadly, the last 4 or 5 months, there's been 3 of them which have been sadly legally hunted because they went over a border into Tanzania. So yeah, you've no idea how long these things are going to be around for, because the genes aren't really getting passed down anymore. So to see these elephants with these massive tusks is something I've been looking forward to doing for a long, long time. So fingers crossed I'll be going up there in September to see those guys for the first ever time. So yeah, lots to look forward to.
I didn't know that was a technical term, a big tusker.
yeah, exactly. I can't remember what the exact weight is. Well, maybe we can pop it up on the screen here once I've had a quick Google. Yeah, but it's mainly that area where you get them, because even some places in Zambia now, elephants, you'll find most of a herd with no tusks. We just don't develop them anymore because the big males they're not breeding anymore because they've been hunted and poached. So it's only the males with smaller tusks who are now breeding. So there's less tusks in elephants in some areas.
Wow, that's so sad. I did not know that.
Yeah, but these guys up there, it's those tusks that, they're almost scraping the ground. They're just crazy size of tusks. Yeah,
wow. I've been thinking about starting some of my own tours throughout the rest of the year, or I guess like 3 or 4 day private workshops near the end of this year for the first time that I'm hosting specifically. I've done teaching for festivals and other things, but hosting my own first big event. Any recommendations you would have to someone like me in terms of how to best put on kind of a private workshop for a few days?
The best way, I think, sadly on these 2 trips, what I've not been able to do is go on the trip and create a video around it. Whereas you can maybe go to these places and you can create a video, which is, I think it's when people see firsthand what it's like to be there, and you can be like, join me and do this. Because I think that would really, as a good way of selling a trip to somebody, when they can actually see what you're doing and you're saying, you can come and do this with me. I think that's a very good way to get the interest going for a trip. And obviously you can put it out there on your social media, and hopefully there's a few people who bite. But I think your enthusiasm, and you seem like a guy who's keen to teach people. There's no point in being somebody who wants to do photography workshops if you don't feel like you have the knowledge to share and you're passionate about sharing the knowledge with people. So I think you've definitely got that for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have thought about creating a video on like somewhere that I want to do a workshop and doing that experience. So yeah, that just affirms that.
I'll trade you safari for coming across that side.
Fair trade status, yeah. Well, I was bummed. I was really hoping that you'd be in, the Europe side of things when I'm going to be in Norway about a month from the time of us recording this, but unfortunately not. So we'll still have to wait to meet up in person.
I'll be out here in Africa still.
Yep. Yeah.
One day we'll meet for sure. One day we shall meet.
So as I always ask to everyone that I interview at the end, what is the single most important thing, in your opinion, to doing wildlife photography?
The single most important thing to it, or required for it? I mean, wildlife is the most important thing about wildlife photography. And for me, I think, a lot of the stuff I do is I'm taking pictures of a wildlife to hopefully sell safaris to people. So every time somebody comes on safari, a big part of their spending goes into the conservation of the area where they're visiting. So I think for me, a big part of doing the wildlife photography is to help protect the animals that I'm photographing. And just to raise awareness to people of maybe sadly almost every single animal I photograph you can Google, and it's like endangered, critically endangered, low numbers, poaching. So but especially with these African animals out here, it's sad that that's the case. So as much awareness as you can raise to people and show the nicer side to these animals, people think scary animals a lot of the time, but if you're showing the softer side to these animals and making people want to come on safari and see them before they might not be around anymore, and then help protect them, I think that's probably one of the main things behind photography for me.
Yeah, the reason behind it. And I love that you shared, that's a really good perspective to when you're photographing in an area, to give back to protecting the animals in that area. I like that. So
yeah, exactly, because everybody who comes is paying conservation fees and park fees and everything, so that goes straight back into protecting the area. So
well, yeah, thank you for chatting today and sharing about your experiences all around the world. I love how much diversity of experience you've gotten to have, and just all the cool art that you get to create because of it, and love following what you do.
No worries. Thanks very much, Jeremy. It was nice to visit my first ever Wilder podcast. I've done the Bird Burger a couple of times, so it's nice to be on the Wilder.
Yeah, most definitely. And looking forward to this year's competition again.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to see more from Andrew MacDonald, head over to his channel in the description below. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can check out more interviews with wildlife photography creators here on our podcast playlist. And make sure you subscribe to our Wilder leaflet in the description below. It's a newsletter that gets you exclusive wildlife photography news and gear discounts. See you in our next episode.